life. Here is the Brother Leon Show. You better recognize.
What's going on, listeners? This is your boy, Brother Leon, and you are tuning into another episode of the Brother Leon Show. So today, hey man, I know it's midnight, so we're going to go into the midnight hour. We are going to have an interview with Dr. Lang. We did part 1 with her. We did part 2 with her. Today, we are going to do something totally different. We are going to talk about divorce. And so you got a little bit of that when we were talking to Belize Spivey and how she was explaining to us about narcissists and narcissism in a relationship as well as a marriage. And she was very authentic and very transparent with her own experience. So today we're going to talk to Dr. Lang, because I'm going to tell you, man, a lot of times people feel as though that they can't function because of divorce. They can't function in the church. They can't function in ministry because they have allowed the stigma of divorce to put a label on them that says you're not able to be used by God. But I am here to tell you today that that is false. And do not give heed to what people say, because the gifts and the callings of God are without repentance. If God can forgive you, you need to forgive yourself and forget about what other people think. Because the crazy thing is that they don't know your story. They don't know the circumstances. And the one thing that we have to realize is this, is that divorce is real. It's definitely real in the church. And we also have to look at it that we both play a part when it comes to it. A lot of it is just not one-sided. People play their parts. And a lot of times when it gets to the place where that is the only option that is left after you done exhausted everything else, you need to be able to get to the place where, hey, I'm going to cut, loose. I'm going to keep it moving. I'm not going to butcher my spouse. I'm not going to allow anger and rage and wrath to butcher them, to hurt me, to scar everybody else. I'm going to do it clean. And I'm going to do it with the word of God and with love, even though we're parting ways. Because I feel as though it's like this. You still do the word, even though things are not going your way. You still do the word. Because the one thing I will say is this, is that when you do the word, things are going to change, or it's going to shield you from the fallout. So I want you guys to understand and know just where we are, because it's real. Now, are you asking me, Brother Leon, what, you believe in divorce? I believe in divorce. Yes. But as a last option. If you can't get it fixed by counseling, then yeah, maybe. And if you can't get it fixed by counseling and both of you guys believe that you can't do it together, then, get the divorce. Because you never know. You may have to leave each other and come back again. And you may be in a place where, hey, your conscience needs to elevate. You need to heal from some issues. And that person likewise. And you two can come back together. But if not, you can use it as a learning experience. And you can grow from it. And when you go into the next relationship or the next marriage, then you have the wisdom, you have the understanding, you have the guidance. But I will say this, make sure that you have taken the time to heal in the presence of God. Because it's not fair if you go into a new relationship, bringing yourself not totally healed, bringing stuff and things to that person that they're unaware of or that they really, shouldn't be handling right now. You have to be with yourself. If it means, you have to be with yourself and be real with yourself to know that, hey, maybe right now this is not a good time for me to be in a relationship. Let me heal. And do that. That's being honest with yourself as well as honest with other people. So today we're going to look at it. Dr. Lang, I'm telling you, she unpacks everything. And so I'm so thankful and I'm honored to have her back on here. And so, hey, we're going to go deep today. It's going to be very transparent. And I want you guys to understand and know is that your life does not end when divorce comes. I want you to know this, is that all things work together for your good, even divorce. And you may not be able to see, right now, but I guarantee you will see later. Because even in the midst of the storm, it's hard to see. But once the storm is past, you see clearly now. But the one thing that I love about God is that he gives us his rainbow. He gives us his promise. That he heals the broken in heart and he mends their wounds. So I want to encourage you guys to listen to that episode that I did, Tears on Bricks. Don't allow the label. Don't allow the accusation. But also listen to the episode that I did with Believe Spivey and listen to this episode. Because I'm going to tell you, man, these two episodes, those three episodes, Tears on Bricks, Believe Spivey, and this are going to give you keys to be whole, to come out, and to be healed, and to also not settle. Because some of us have settled. And so with that being said, guys, we're going to call Dr. Lang right now. So yeah, let's go here, man. We're going to call her. This is going to be a very interesting conversation.
Hello.
Hey, how you doing, Dr. Lang?
I'm blessed, can't complain.
Oh, that's great. That's great. So tell me, how have things been with you? I know you're back to work now. So what's going on? Are you back into the regular workflow now?
Oh yeah, back to hospice chaplaincy, ministry that I love. So God is good. I can't complain. Okay,
that's great. I was telling the listeners we're going to go in deep tonight. So I want to be able to talk about your book. Does Love Cover That? As well as talk about divorce, because I just did a show with a phenomenal woman in God. Her name is Believe Spivey, and we were talking about narcissists and being in narcissist relationships.
Okay.
So I know we're going to cover some of that tonight as well. So yeah, I just want to start it off just. Dr. Lang, can you tell us, the premise of your book, Does Love Cover That?
The premise of that book, I actually wrote that book in response to just a bad love experience. At the time, my kids were young and I just left a marriage that was dysfunctional, to say the least. And I was a pastor at the same time. And I wrestled with, how do I tell people that marriage is a wonderful thing when I just came out of a marriage that really just crushed my spirit? And so I thought about how love in the Bible says love covers a multitude of sins. It doesn't say love covers a multitude of stuff. It doesn't say love covers a multitude of dysfunction. And we have misappropriated love the same way we misappropriate faith and money.
Okay.
We have this misguided notion of what love is and what love is not. Like, clearly the Bible says love is patient, love is kind, but then we say so-and-so loves me because they get angry. And clearly the Bible says love does not seek his own. And we say so-and-so loves me when they stalking us and when they trying to tell us what to do and all kinds of stuff. And so we take love out of context because we have to live in a dysfunctional, and sometimes it's dysfunctional life that we've created. And so part of living in a dysfunctional life and relationship is having a new normal. And at times that new normal is so painful that we no longer can recognize the truth when it comes our way. And so as I was teaching what was it? Oh, it was like a Bible study class at this church in Philadelphia. And they were asking me to teach the fruit of the Spirit. And I was like, man, that's so boring. I mean, we do it all the time, but I just felt like it was so boring and needed some kind of oomph to it. And so I just was like, Lord, how can I make the fruit of the Spirit more interesting? And so then God just began to show me how fruit changes. And so love is who we are because God is love. And then our fruit allows us to do what we do, which is love. So love is who we are, and it's also what we do. And so our fruit then begins to manifest in loving or non-loving ways, depending on how we've been loved and how we've been experiencing love. And so the book talks about 4 stages of fruit: good fruit, bruised fruit, sour fruit, and unripe fruit. And so the premise was, when you have fruit and you leave it in a trash can overnight, you could be upstairs and you start to smell something. You're like, man, that is funky. That's because the fruit was left unattended and it just kind of withered away. And so I say, if your fruit is funky, then your love is funky. And that sometimes we can smell you before we see you coming, just like that fruit that's in the kitchen. And so when you have good fruit, that's when, God is good and you're loving from a healthy place. And we all have challenges, but you don't have as many challenges in the good fruit stage. And then as you experience non-loving experiences with various people, then your fruit can become bruised. And in that bruised fruit stage is where you love from a hurting place. And that's the place where love has come and you've misappropriated your love, or you misappropriated somebody else's love, and you're living in this place of pain, and you're trying to figure out where do you go from here. And that's a pivotal point in many people's lives, because pain can become your new normal. And then that dysfunction becomes what you look for in every other relationship. So in that phase, that's where you can make a shift. Either you can stay in that pain, or bitterness is set in, and then you'll go to sour fruit. And that's where you get angry, and you love people from an angry place, and you're like, man, love sucks, all kinds of stuff. And you're like, hurt people, and love don't mean nothing. And you might be in relationships that have nothing to do with love, because you just don't want to be involved in that component of life just because it's too painful. And so it's in that component where the fruit is sour, where anger starts to rule the day. And so what we know about emotions is anger is a surface emotion. And underneath anger is always hurt. Always, always, always. And if you can get to the hurt, if you can get to what's underneath the anger, then the anger will dissipate, because that's just a surface emotion. And for many of us, anger is a lot easier to deal with than pain. We don't like to deal with hurt. We don't like to say my feelings are hurt. So it's in that sour place, the sour fruit, where you really need the deliverance, because your fruit is now tainted, and you can then taint other people's fruit. The difference with bruised fruit is that you're still hurt, but you're still tender, you're still moldable, there's still opportunity to shift it back. So after you get the sour fruit, after deliverance comes and you allow God into your heart and your mind, and you say, that was just that one person, that was just that one incident. Love is not like that across the board. I'm going to give God opportunity to do something in me to restore my brokenness, and then I'll be prepared for when the next person comes. Then you move to unripe fruit. So unripe fruit is kind of where restoration happens. You get back to the basics. You do a lot of self-care. You do a lot of reading. You allow God to kind of restore that which has been broken. And then once you go through that part of the fruit, then you go back to good fruit. And then that's where you're healthy. The interesting thing is you can have different things in your life in different places. So when I wrote that book, I gave the example that in that time in my life, good fruit was ministry. I was a children's pastor. Ministry was good. God was using me. In the bruised fruit section, I had a husband who was a habitual cheater, and I was dealing with him having a baby with the choir director. So then, at the same time, I was in sour fruit because I was so angry that something like this would happen. My kids were little, everything seemed to be right, and right in the midst of that wham, out of nowhere, comes this foolishness, and now my whole life had to be changed. So I was very angry with that. So that part of my fruit was sour. And then on the unripe fruit side, I was like, okay, I'm still hopeful. I still believe that God's going to make a way out of no way. And so I had different things in different parts of the fruit at the same time. And so in the book, I give people permission to understand that you can have long suffering, but then have no patience. And you can have joy, but then you can have other parts of the fruit, right? There's 9 fruits of the Spirit. So the way that I put it is that there's a translation of the Bible, the New English translation, has love as the fruit, and then it has the other 8 as the component of the fruit. So that's the premise that I use, that the actual fruit of the Spirit is love, and that these other things, patience, kindness, goodness, gentleness, all of that are the components of love. And so that's the way we go through the book, saying that God is love, so we are love. We're made in the image and likeness of God, and that love is who we are, and love is what we do. And so the fruit is how we do what we do. And if your fruit is funky, then your love is funky.
Wow, you done gave us some revelation right there. So let me ask you this. Where does peace fall in that?
Peace. Well, peace is a challenge, I will tell you, because when your fruit is good, peace is fine. That's good. When your fruit is sour, then your peace is unsettled. You can have partial peace. So for me, everything is relative. Like, the only thing that's not relative is that God is real. Mm-hmm. Everything else is relative. So everything has context in how you perceive it. So who God is for me is different than who God is for somebody else. You know, because for me, I've known God. I've never not known God. So peace for me is different, because it's just like when you're grieving, right? So when your loved one is dying, at the beginning of that illness or at the beginning of that sickness, you're like, God, I'm believing you for healing. I'm believing that everything's going to be all right. And the diagnosis comes, and you got 6 months to live. So then your perspective has to shift. You still believe God for healing. However, now it's like, okay, the days that I have left, God, I'm asking that they be peaceful. And then you get to the point where your body shuts down, and you're not eating anymore, and you're not breathing right anymore. So then it shifts again, and you're like, God, I'm believing you for healing. I just don't want to be in pain. And so at that point, where the pain is now relieved, and now it's time to transition, now you're moving to, God, I just want a peaceful transition. You believe God the whole time, you've had peace the whole time, but it has to shift, it has to be contextual to where you are. So when your fruit is good, your peace is fine. You're like, okay, peace is good. When your fruit is sour, then your peace changes a little, because now you have to manage your emotions in the midst of the pain. When your fruit is, well, that's when your fruit is bruised, but when your fruit is sour, now you're angry. So now your peace is subjective to how angry you are, how mad you are. Also, when you're in your unripe fruit, your peace is different, because at that point, you know, you're giving God your heart and your mind. You're saying, God, I can't fix it. I can't do it. I don't know what to do. So your peace lies in the uncertainty that you have, but the assurance that God is going to make a way out of no way. So you can have peace in all 4. It's just going to look different in all 4.
Okay, because I know a lot of people, you know, they struggle with the fact that I have to come to peace knowing that this did not go the way that I wanted to. You know, knowing that the relationship is over, and knowing that there will not be any type of reconciliation. So, you know, let me ask you this. What do you say to the person that, you know, Lord, I've been believing, I've been praying, but yet, you know, nothing happens to that other person's mind? You know what I mean? Well, they don't see that change.
I know exactly what you mean.
Yeah.
Because for me, it always looks like the person who did you wrong is living a life. They living, back in the day, we call it living like a fat rat. Mm-hmm. You know, they look like they prosper and they look like everything is cool. And even in the book of Psalms, it says, how long, O Lord, will the people who hurt me, how long will they prosper? And I'm sitting here watching. You know, it reminds you of Harlem Nights when Suge and then they was living large, and the cop was like, I'm living in a hovel, and y'all living good. You know, you just sitting like, what is going on? So in that moment, you have to realize that what looks good It's not always good. What looks like they have peace, they don't always have peace, but they're not going to tell you that.
Mm-hmm.
So the saving grace is you don't know what their struggle is. And you have to believe that God is going to bring restoration and healing to you. And eventually your focus won't be them anyway. Eventually your focus is going to shift to yourself and say, God, do something in me so that when Mrs. Right or Mr. Right comes, I'm prepared. Because as long as you're focused on the other person is missing or wanting that other person to suffer, that has something to do with you forgiving them.
Mm-hmm.
Right, because when you forgive them, that means that when the thought comes back to you about what has been done, that you no longer want to do something evil to them. That's what forgiveness is. It's not forgetting.
Yeah.
It's just that every time the thought comes back, you're not like, yeah, you're going to bust hell wide open. You know, it's a difference in you, so that now it doesn't matter what happens to them. You know that in the end, the ends will justify the means.
Yeah. Yeah, because I know some people, they're like, you know what? I'm going to get revenge. I'm a flat 3 tires. I'm going to put some sugar in the tank. I'm serious.
Put the windows out your car.
Yes.
Yeah, I understand. And in the moment, you might get some satisfaction. But you know, when you really think about it, is it worth it? Is it worth going to jail? Is it worth losing your freedom? All of that over somebody who didn't want you anyway. But if they really wanted you, you wouldn't be in this position no way.
Yeah. Yeah, exactly. So Doc, let me ask you this. Is it possible that a person can pray and pray for another person, and then God makes that person love you, and do what they supposed to do? Because there's a lot of women out here. I'm praying for my husband. I'm praying that God gonna make him love me. What do you say to that?
I would say that you can't want something for a person who doesn't want it for themselves. Mm-hmm. And prayer is not about manipulation, and prayer is not, just like the genie when you watch Aladdin. He said, I can't make anybody fall in love with you. Well, God is not a genie.
Yeah. And
there are 3 wills in operation: God's perfect will, God's permissive will, and God's gift to us, which is our free will. Mm-hmm. And so God's perfect will, you would think that would trump everything else, but it doesn't. Our free will changes the game every single time. Mm-hmm. And God can tell the person that, God can say that's your wife, God can say that's your husband, and you still have the option to say no. There are so many homeless people who's supposed to be preaching, so many people other places. You're supposed to be preaching, you on the choir, now the choir sounds terrible. It's so many things that are going on because of free will. So you could pray all day. That person still has free will to do it or not. And that's where people get messed up, because they think that their prayer wasn't answered. Mm-hmm. Sometimes God will answer our prayer in a way that doesn't make sense to us.
Yeah,
exactly. So you say, God changed my husband's heart. Maybe God changed your husband's heart is your husband's going to leave you because he wasn't meaning you any good no way. Mm-hmm. And instead of dragging you through years and years and years of pain and heartache, maybe that joker's going to leave and you're going to be upset, but there's a whole lot of stuff God protected you from. Mm-hmm. Because if he out, let's say, he or she, because there was a time where women weren't out there cheating. Yeah. Now, I don't know. I think women cheating as much as men, if not more. I don't know.
Yeah, it's about the same.
But you out there getting your freak on, dropping it like it's hot, you're not using no protection, God could be saving you from AIDS because it has no, it's real. Mm-hmm. So, it's all about perspective.
Yeah, I'm glad you said that. It's about perspective. So let me ask you this. Once people get to the place where, they are, okay, this is about to happen, is this almost like the 4 stages of grief, to a certain degree, knowing that the relationship is over first? You might be angry, then you might be in denial, and the next thing you know, you call yourself, you might be drinking some wine, and next thing you know, you listening to some love songs, and then you call them out. No, we need to get back together. I miss you. I love you. What about all that?
Right. I would say that grief is not about death. Well, it is about death, but it's more about loss. Mm-hmm. And so the loss of a relationship, the loss of your future, the loss of what you hope can happen, the loss of a lot of things causes us to grieve. And so when you look at grieving a relationship, there's so many nuances to that, because depending on your age, depending on how long you've been married, if you have kids, Financially, what does that mean for you? There's so many intricate details of relationships falling apart that sometimes you can get caught up in just the pain of it, just the anger of it, that you don't even see which stage of grief you're actually in. Because moving to that place of acceptance doesn't mean that you take responsibility for what's not yours.
Mm-hmm.
Like, there's always two sides of a story. At the same time, just like with when Jonah was getting on the boat, he got on the boat and upset everybody's life. It wasn't their fault.
Yeah.
It was Jonah's fault. They were minding their business, going where they was going. Jonah gets on the boat, causes a whole storm to come. And sometimes in our life, people could get on our boat, cause all kind of storms, and if we don't throw them off the boat, then we stuck just like the people on the boat. They was throwing their stuff overboard, they was throwing their food overboard, and they was like, wait a minute, stop throwing your stuff overboard and throw the problem overboard.
Mm-hmm.
And a lot of times, we reckon God will show us the problem, but we'd rather have the problem and not be alone than to throw it overboard and wait for God to send us the right person.
Yeah, exactly. Let me ask you this. What do you say to those denominations that believe that you can't get remarried until your first husband or first wife die?
I would say that every text has a context,
Mm-hmm.
and the text taken out of context is the con.
Okay.
And so when the Bible says the husband of one wife,
Yeah.
then let's look at the whole context, right?
Yeah.
Because in the Old Testament, men had more than one wife.
Yeah.
So at what point in the New Testament did not having more than one wife become the norm?
Mm-hmm.
Because if we want to look at Bible, let's look at Bible, where men were allowed to have more than one wife.
Yeah.
And so don't take one text and then make that the standard, but you don't tell the progression of how that happened.
Yeah.
And if that's the case, then what does that mean for the woman? Because they weren't talking to us.
Mm-hmm.
They was only talking to y'all.
Yeah.
So if we don't look at the text, let's look at the text. Let's take a whole cultural look at the text, not just what is convenient for us. Yeah, God hates divorce. But also what it says is, because of the hardness of your heart, I gave you a divorce, talking to the man.
Yeah.
Women had no rights back then. Women were subject to whoever male was it, whether it was her father, her brother, or her husband.
Yes.
She had no rights. She was property. So it wasn't talking to her. She couldn't get a divorce no way.
Yeah. Wow. I'm glad you unpacked that, because I know when people hear this, they're going to get delivered, and they're going to be like, I'm not going to allow myself to be bound by that condemnation.
That's right.
You know,
The Bible says when the Son sets free, is free indeed.
yes, exactly. So Doc, let me ask you this. How do people get to the place where they can start, healing? You start healing, and then, how do you gauge whether or not it's okay for you to start dating again?
I would say that when you could think of that person and not get irate, when you can think of that person and not get angry, when you can think of that person and not fall into the fetal position, when you can think of that person and begin to understand that it was their loss and they made a choice to walk away, and then God is able to restore and bring you to another place,
Mm-hmm.
then you can start dating. The challenge is that even though people are in the church, and although people say they're spiritual, they follow worldly principles.
Mm-hmm.
And the worldly principle says the way to get over somebody is to get under somebody else.
Mm-hmm.
And we can act like church folk and people of faith don't do that.
Man,
But even if
please.
something happens, they run into the next Joe or the next James.
Yes. Uh-huh.
And the tragedy is that transitional person
Yeah.
always gets hurt because they're not the real person.
Yeah.
They're just a transition person.
Yeah.
And then sometimes when you try to make the transition person the permanent person, you wound up hurt.
Mm-hmm.
Because you weren't in the right heart space, you weren't in the right head space to be in a new relationship. So now you're lying to this person. You're lying to yourself because you're really not ready. So now all your hopes and all your dreams on this person, and it's not even real. It's a fabrication.
Yeah.
So you can't really authentically move to another place until you take time to bring some self-care, some self-reflection, and some self-education.
Mm-hmm.
Go look at 1 Corinthians 13. what does it say about what love is and what love is not? Make a list.
Mm-hmm.
Say, oh my goodness, all this time I thought this was love, and this is not really love.
Yeah.
I mean, that's where you start.
Mm-hmm. Exactly. I know a lot of times there are some people they're hurt and then they fall some kind of way. They end up getting hooked into some type of delusion, and then they just call themselves getting a word from the Lord or a word from a false prophet, and next thing you know, they up here done hooked up with a person and oh yeah, the Lord told me that you supposed to be my spouse. I'm like, hold on, you ain't even healed from the last person. How God gonna tell you that?
Well, the Bible talks about intimacy. It talks about there'll come a time when everybody got itching ears.
Mm-hmm.
I think the challenge for many of us is people don't like to be alone.
Yeah.
And there's nothing wrong with that. The challenge is there's a difference between being alone and being lonely.
Mm-hmm.
And when you're alone, you could be whole and you could be healthy and you could be actively engaged in your healing process when you are alone.
Mm-hmm.
When you are lonely, that's a different space and a different grace, because being lonely has something to do with your emotional response and the way that you manage or mismanage your emotions. And being lonely can cause you to be drawn to other lonely people.
Yeah.
And can also allow you to be a magnet for people who just looking for a lonely person to take advantage of.
Yeah, exactly.
And so if we don't differentiate, so I think one of the disservices that the church does is that we're good at pretending. We're good at pretending to provide ministry. However, for those lonely people, not the people who are alone and they're healthy and, they could really say I'm single and satisfied, but those people who are struggle with having to wake up by themselves and go to sleep by themselves, there should be a support group in the church that they can then come and say, you know what, this is really hard. This is, back in the day, the Catholic Church used to have all kinds of dances because they understood people want to be connected. You could tell people not to date all you want to, but unless you provide a safe space for people to meet people, that's where you're going to have your problem. You already know as human beings, we're created to be connectional.
Mm-hmm.
The first thing God said, the only thing God said was not good was for man to be alone.
Yeah.
Everything else was good.
Yeah.
So if we understand it's not good for man to be alone, why do we teach people that that it's okay to be alone and you shouldn't complain, and now you're making these bipolar Christians? Because people are really struggling. People are really hurting, just like with the COVID. Social distancing is killing people.
Oh, yeah, it is.
They don't know what to do.
Yeah, you're
you got
right.
all these introverts. You got introverts who are very happy about it, but you got a bunch of extroverts that are going insane.
Oh,
and they're having parties with 700 people because they just can't function.
Yeah, exactly. So, Doc, I'm glad you hit on that whole thing about loneliness. What happens when a person is lonely and all of a sudden they meet an opportunist who plays on that, and then the next thing they get played, they get used, they get abused, and the next thing, Doc, forgive me for what I'm about to say.
Okay.
They get used and abused, and then the next thing you know, here it is. All these niggas ain't shit.
Oh, Lord.
What do you say to that?
I say, what I say, because I tell you, there was a time in my life that was my philosophy. I really believe that.
Mm-hmm.
You have to get to a place where you take ownership that as a woman, you had an instinct and you saw a red flag and you chose not to look at it.
Mm-hmm.
Either that or you were in an unhealthy emotional place and you allowed yourself to be duped into something that had you been in a healthy place, you would never fell for it.
Mm-hmm.
But you still have to, even though it's not your fault per se, that this person did that, and that person has to take responsibility for manipulating you, taking advantage of you, as a person, you then have to take responsibility that you put yourself in a position where you were in an unhealthy place. And sometimes, all the time, when women and men are coming out of a broken relationship, they need to put boundaries around themselves so that when those moments come, when their emotional response trumps their intellectual response, they would have somebody to hold them accountable. Mm-hmm. So if I know my heart is broken, then I'm not going to go out by myself. I'm going to take some girlfriends. I'm going to say, listen, y'all see me do something crazy, I want you to pull my coattail. Don't let me go home with some dude. I don't hear what's going on, right? So you put parameters around yourself to protect yourself.
Yeah. Yeah, I'm glad you said that, because, you know, the crazy thing is that, you know, when you're real vulnerable like that, you real fresh like that, you know, sometimes you might need your girls around you. Y'all might not need to go out. You know what I mean? Y'all
better watch a movie on Netflix.
Yeah, something. You know, y'all better do something. It might be, nah, child, you ain't ready for the club yet.
That's right. That's right.
I'm serious, because, you know, it's crazy because, you know, I've seen it. I've seen it. It's like, and it reminds me of that Stevie Wonder song, Rocket Love.
Yeah.
You know what I mean? And the part of that song is, you know, half a mile from heaven, you drop me back down to this cold world. And it's like that. It's like, you know, you ain't healed from one relationship, and then you go into this new relationship, and it's like rockets and stars. Oh, he the best. I done took him to meet my mom. And then the next thing you know, it's been like, what, 4 or 5 months, and then bam, everything that fell apart. You know, and next thing you know, now you're grieving over 2 relationships. Right.
You know, I think people have they have a lack of impulse control, because so we have to look at the biological or physiological aspect of falling in love, if you want to say that's the thing, that all kinds of brain activity happens. You get all kinds of endorphins and all kinds of stimulants that happen when you have that falling in love experience. Yeah. And so that part of the relationship is exciting, and adrenaline is going. All of that's going to fade after a while when real love kicks in, and you have to do some stick-to-itness, and you have to make a choice every day that you're going to love this person. And so we have to look at that whole falling in love experience and make sure that thing is authentic. Yeah. Is it love or is it lust? I mean, which one is it?
Yeah, exactly.
And a lot of times, it's the physical part of us that's longing for something. It's not really our heart, because we guarded that so well, and nobody can penetrate that anyway. But it's that physical part of us that's like, man, I just got to get something. Okay, well, is it really worth all that? Because now you're in I'm sorry, as Jada said, you're in an entanglement.
Yep. Oh my God. It's funny that you said that, because now, what's out now, Lisa Ray has put out there, I'm willing to be in an entanglement with Will Smith. I'm like, oh my God, here we go.
Oh, Lord.
I'm like, man, here we go. I'm like, oh my God.
Yeah, that's a mess.
Yes. Oh my God. I did a podcast episode on that. I'm like, I never got so many clicks on that. Oh my God. I got like, I think the last time I checked it was 74.
Wow.
Yeah, and I'm thinking to myself, I'm like, God, is this what people want to hear? I mean, I was ratchet with it. I'm serious. Yeah. But I guess that's what people like. You know, when it comes to sex.
I mean, you got people stuck in the house, they looking for some drama.
Yeah. So I just, okay, all right, Lord. You know, I'm trying to, you know, give something to uplift the people, but I guess, hey, we got to talk about some hot, oily monkey sex.
Oh, yeah. It's crazy.
Yeah. So, Doc, let me ask you this, because I know a lot of people believe that that soul ties do not exist. Is it possible that when you get a divorce, that even though you got the physical divorce, there's still a soul tie?
Oh, my goodness, yes. It is absolutely possible. Not only is it possible, it's true.
Okay.
And it's really the soul tie that keeps us from walking away and staying gone. Like, if your head and your heart don't have a conversation where they're on the same page, that soul tie will keep you going back to that person, because it's deeper than just an emotional attachment. It's also a spiritual attachment, even if it's dysfunctional. Like when I left my husband, I told him, I'm not leaving you because I don't love you. I'm leaving you because you're not going to do right. And it was a conscious decision that I made to leave because I didn't stop loving him. I still love him, but he's not going. But our relationship was dysfunctional, and me loving him was not enough to cover him not loving me. And even in his mind of loving me, he didn't love me the way that I needed to be loved. And so therein lies the key, because people would say, "Oh, I do love you." Maybe you do, from your perspective. But if you don't love me the way that I need to be loved and the way that I receive love, then it doesn't matter. But our soul tie is in place because it doesn't change. So the soul tie can be counteracted with an intelligent decision to stay gone, because your instinctive nature is to be drawn back to that person, because that's how it was. Now, there's a difference between somebody that you are soul tied to because you love them and somebody you're soul tied to because you lusted after them. It's something very different. And so the challenge is, how do I disconnect as much as possible from the person who I don't need to be tied to?
Yeah.
Because I've seen people, they've been married years and years, and then they get a divorce, and then they wind up getting married all over again, not necessarily because the love was so deep, but the connection, that level of, you rather be connected to what you know than have to go out there and deal with the unknown.
Wow. So you hit the nail on the head. Well, let me ask you this. You talked about you were coming from a place of logic and choice. How hard is it? I mean, is it hard for women to really, okay, I'm going to put these emotions aside. Let me look at this thing from a logical standpoint. And if they, they start looking at it from a logical standpoint and seeing that, he ain't got no get right with him. You know what I mean?
Well, women are created to be multifaceted. So we are as intellectual as we are emotional. And the balance of that gives us our ability to be multitaskers. It makes, because we were created to make the not good good. And so God's not going to create something that is less than or won't bring good. And so for a woman, what she also has is an ability to rationalize her instinct away. And so the Bible in Job talks about God giving us wisdom in the inward part. And so as a woman, we have great instinct. And so even when a man, let's say he has not cheated, if he even thinks about cheating or it's a possibility of cheating, something in her is going to say, something ain't right. She can't put a finger on it. She can't, you know what I mean? She can't call you out. But there's something in there that's saying it's not right. What happens is that our intellect will then say, you know what? It's all right. I didn't see it. And we'll begin to normalize a lie. And that will become our truth.
Wow.
And so for women who need to make a decision about the man in their life, part of the biggest challenge is there's so many variables. If you have a child with him, you're still connected to him for the rest of that child's life. If you have children, if finances is an issue, if that was your first love, if you really have an emotional, like if you struggle with being alone, go back to that, then that dysfunction is going to be more enticing, because at least you know what you're dealing with. So you think about, okay, out here in the world, dating is different now than it was back in the day when I was young. It's different. Now you got to worry about the down low and all kinds of stuff. And so for some women, just like men, it's cheaper to keep them. I mean, because you know what you're dealing with.
Yeah.
You say certain things, he's going to do certain things. You know that, at a certain time in the month, he's going to bring you a check. Like, it's just regimented. You can count on some stuff. When you have to go into the unknown, especially like for me at 47, I'm thinking, man, I don't know what's out here.
Yeah.
Like, and I think about, okay, so for me, right? I have 5 degrees, 3 ordinations, you know, in like the upper middle class. So then I'm thinking to myself, okay, am I going to find a man that has that? Probably not. Am I going to find a man who's not intimidated because I have that? I don't know. And so your choices are limited. So then you say, okay, well, all right, I got to make some concessions in some areas. So maybe he won't have the same income. Maybe he won't have the same degrees, but he got to have this, and this. And you get out there, you're like, whoop, ain't none of that. Now I got to make another concession. I'm like, okay, maybe if he just breathes, you know what I mean? You just go to all the extremes of like, you know, he just be a Mr. Dad. You know, that it's just crazy. And so you got so many variables to say, well, what are my choices? I mean, what are my real options?
Yeah.
And so when you go to a place where you have to make an intellectual decision, that means you've counted the cost and you're willing to walk alone. And you're willing to say, you know what, I'm going to walk alone. And I'd rather be by myself than have to deal with this foolishness.
Yeah.
What does that mean moving forward? Does that mean for the next 10 years you're going to be alone? And then, you know, you have no sex life, you have no this, you know, your money's going to be funny, you ain't got no honey. Is it worth it? And so women can make an intellectual choice, but they make an intellectual choice based on what makes sense to them and what they can emotionally handle. Because you can make an intellectual choice that your emotions just can't really, you can't handle it. So you got to find some sort of balance. So there's some women who make an intellectual choice to leave, but they have to wait till the emotions catch up. And then there's some women who make an emotional decision and they have to wait for their intellect to catch up. One way or the other, something's going to catch up with something.
Yeah. Yeah. You know what? It's funny that you would say that because it's almost like when one of those things catches up and that person is with, say, like the rebound person. Next thing you know, it's like, I love you, but I'm not in love with you. I'm like, oh my God.
Right.
Can you unpack that? I'm serious. I've been curious. I've been wanting to hear a woman unpack that. Can you unpack that for us?
Yeah, because so what's interesting about that is that let's suppose you were in a relationship and you were head over heels for this guy and for whatever reason it didn't work out. And you put all your eggs in one basket, you was good to go, you was gonna give up everything for him. Because here's the truth about women is that we willingly sacrifice our hopes, our dreams, our future for the men in our lives and for our children. That goes without saying.
Okay.
Like, you know, like you take your average black woman, we are acculturated to sacrifice. We are conditioned and trained to serve. And so from little girls, we're taught how to serve our fathers. From little girls, we're taught how to serve our brothers. So that serving becomes ingrained in who we are because that's what we do. And so when you get to an age of like 12, 13, so you look at it like this. Like when you're like 4 or 5 years old, you like, oh, woman, hear me roar. I can do anything boys could do. Doesn't even matter. I'm going to kill the game. Then when you get to be about 12 and you start recognizing that, oh, he's cute, then you start to minimize the girl power. You like, man, I can't act too girly or too aggressive because he won't like me. So then you recognize the difference. When you do act aggressive, the cute boys don't like you. That's just I'm making a generalization, but I'm just telling you the progression. So then when you get to be like 13, 14, you recognize that on some level you got to dummy down a little because he doesn't like you to be too smart or too loud or too this or too that. So you begin to hold yourself back so that you can have the boy that you want. So by the time you're 16, 17 years old, you realize that you have to minimize the power that you have in order to walk alongside a young man who's still discovering who he is. So you've given him credit for who you see him becoming. And he has not become that yet. But you're looking down the line saying, okay, I got to pull back some so I can give him space to be himself. I got to give him space to grow into the man he's supposed to be. Never mind that now you are crippling you growing into the woman you're supposed to be. So now you have pulled back, you stunted your growth, so you kind of stuck at this place, but because you got the intellectual and the emotional intelligence to walk this walk that you've now created, you stunted your growth, but now here you are, you're moving, you're living, you're having your being, helping this man be who he's supposed to be. So now you're like 18, 19, 20 years old, you're like, man, he's like, man, I want to have a baby, blah, blah. So now you stunted your growth, you sacrificed whoever you were supposed to be, who you're growing into. Now you've become somebody's wife, you've become somebody's mother. So now you are completely on the back burner because you got to be present for him, you got to be present for this baby. So you get 10, 12 years down the line, you're in your end of your 30s, pushing into your 40s, and you're like, this is not really who I wanted to be prior to jumping in this cycle of wanting to be with this man right here. So you begin to have this awakening that happens in your mind, and you're like, wait a minute. I'm more than just a baby maker, and I'm more than just a wife, and I'm more than just a mother, and I'm more than just a housewife, and I'm more than just a this, and I'm more than just a that. But you've created this lifestyle that has created this sacrificial lamb of who you've become. Mm-hmm. So now you're in your 40s, you're like, oh my goodness, what is happening? What is happening? And so as we evolve as women, the sacrificial component that has been engrafted in who we are begins to be lifted out as you become more enlightened about who God called you to be. And so now you got this whole bipolar person. You're like, wait, this is nothing like what I said I wanted to be. But now you have to reckon with that's nobody's doing but your own. So how do you wrestle with that? Mm-hmm. So let's suppose this whole time you're with this man and you wake up and you're like, this is not really what I want. And so the same happens when you're in a relationship and you leave that relationship and then you get in a relationship with another man. You're still wrestling with who you were becoming and who you stifled in the last relationship. So now you jump in a new relationship, still confused about who you are becoming. And so now you've got this fabricated person that you think you are, and you think this man loves you, and you think this relationship is going to be different. The common denominator is you. Because if you didn't tell him in the first relationship what you really wanted, now you're in a new relationship, still based on a lie of who you are becoming. You're going to wake up one day and say, wait a minute, this is not really what I want either. I don't really know what I want. So what you going to do? You going to stay in this relationship and lie? Or you going to roll out and try to figure out who you are?
Yeah. Yeah, a lot of them roll out and they tell you, hey, I love you, but I'm not in love with you anymore. I need time to find myself. Right. Because you've given up all of who you are. Mm-hmm. All of who you are. And it's not, it's almost an unconscious gesture of love. Like that is the way that your average woman thinks about giving up who she is so that you could be who you are. And if women could understand that internally we do that, and men could understand that that's what she does, then he would then hold her accountable for being authentic to who she is. One of the things when I do marriage counseling with my soldiers, I show this clip of this movie called The Notebook. And right when they get back together, mm-hmm. she has to decide between the man she loves and the guy she was engaged to. And mm-hmm. so she's about to go back to the guy she's engaged to. And so he comes around and says, what do you want? She's like, what? He's like, what do you want? She's like, it's not fair. I don't have to do. He's like, I don't care what he wants. I don't care what I want. What do you want? And she is not able to say what she wants. Because at that point in her life, she was so accustomed to sacrificing and making everybody else happy. So in that moment, the couples get to see that as women, that's our norm. It's not about what we want. Mm-hmm. But then you have the other extreme, so it's like a pendulum. Yeah.
But he had the extreme of giving up everything. And he had the opposite where I'm not giving up nothing. I don't care about nothing. So you got to find a happy medium where you can still give up something, but you hold on. So I tell people all the time, don't make your kids your life.
Mm-hmm.
Because when they leave, you'll have nothing.
Yeah.
And then when they leave, what are you and your spouse going to do? If you make your kids your life, when you're empty nesters, you won't even know each other.
Yeah. Yeah, exactly. It's crazy because, you know, it seems like after the kids leave and they go to college, and then all of a sudden after 15, 20 years of marriage, now, you know, mom and dad are getting a divorce, and it's like, it's shocking to the kids because they never saw it coming.
Right. But they were like roommates. They were like two ships passing in the night.
Yeah. Yeah, exactly.
And children can become a distraction that is convenient.
Mm-hmm.
When you lose connection with your spouse, whether it's intentional or unintentional, a lot of times it's unintentional. You know, you trying to raise the kids, you trying to put food on the table, you know, you working, or you staying home and you working. And if you're not intentional about building that relationship, having a date night, you know, doing something with each other, building that friendship, if you're not intentional, I'll tell you, the devil will subtly begin to eat away at the foundation of your relationship. Mm-hmm. And you will wake up one day and be like strangers.
Yeah, exactly. A lot of times you can tell that in people's sleeping patterns. When both of you guys sleeping with your back to one another, that's a telltale sign.
Oh, yeah.
That's definitely a telltale sign. So, Doc, let me ask you this. Was there ever a time, you know, in your marriage where it was like, you know, you really could, I don't know if you know, I don't know how your discernment and everything was. Was there ever a time where you was like, you know, am I going crazy? I know something going on, or, you know, I'm trying to fix this. And you know, did your ex-spouse ever make you think that it was your fault that all this happened?
Unfortunately, yes. Unfortunately, it's sad to say that some people don't really take ownership
mm-hmm.
of what they've done.
Yeah.
Whether it's male or female, because we have to be fair to the brothers that there are times when the women are the ones cheating and the women are the ones lying and the women are the ones who have broken the heart of these men, and now they've gone out and
Hello, Doc. Whoa, hold up. Wow. Oh, man, that's crazy. Hopefully Doc will call back. But, guys, she is talking about she's being very transparent. So I don't know if we are losing her, but let me see if I can get a hold of her.
Okay.
All right. Guys, we got Doc back. We lost her for a little bit. But Doc, you were talking about not taking responsibility because I had asked you, you know, was there ever a time in the marriage that your ex-spouse made you feel like that everything was your fault?
Yeah, you know, when I look back, I remember thinking, none of this is my fault. All of this is your fault. And in the midst of the struggle, I took responsibility. Actually, I carried the burden of what did I do that was wrong?
Mm-hmm.
And I carried the burden of what could I have done that fixed it?
Yeah.
And in the midst of me beating myself up, in order for him to not take responsibility for his part, he blamed me. And so I had to get to a point where I differentiated my part and his part. Couldn't rely on him to tell me that.
Mm-hmm. Okay, yeah, because I know
I had to take ownership myself.
Yeah, because I know it's a lot of women, they feel as though, well, you know, if I would have prayed more, this wouldn't have happened. You know, if I was, you know, dressed up a little sexier, if I would have did, you know, some of his sexual fantasies, maybe this wouldn't have happened. And I tell some people, I'm like, nah, he chose that. I mean, you know, you could be throwing it from the chandelier, he still would have got that, still would have did it. But you know, some women feel as though that, you know, it's my fault, and some of the men, that do that, they blame, the women that take all the responsibility. It's like,
right.
You know what I mean? And the crazy part is that at the end of the day, when you look at it from another perspective, you see like, nah, he chose that.
Right.
And, he chose that. And, some women, they condemn themselves. Some, they have a hard time trying to forgive themselves because, it ended. And I think a lot of things, a lot of questions that I hear some women, why is it that I can't keep a man? That's,
it's sad to say that where the church should be the healing place, the church has become the hurting place.
Yeah.
Because we don't allow broken people to speak their truth.
Mm-hmm.
We cover it up with church language and church etiquette. We cover it up, and a hurt that hasn't been dealt with has no time frame for healing.
Mm-hmm.
And so if you don't give a person space to grieve the loss, if you don't give a person space to actually think out loud in a safe place and have somebody who can then reflect back what they're saying, then they're going to continue in that dysfunction. That's like kids back in the day used to think you get pregnant from kissing. Well, you can't get pregnant from kissing, but you can get pregnant as a result of kissing somebody and leading to the next place. So if you don't give all the information, you can't expect people to be spiritually healthy. You can't tell me that the Bible says to be single, but then you don't tell me how to live single effectively. You can't do that to me.
Yeah.
And that's what the church says. The church says, you know what? Don't have sex. Just go out there, live for the Lord, and get your flesh under control. But you don't give me any ways to do that.
Exactly.
You don't provide opportunity for me to talk about it. Because when I come to Bible study and I'm asking you, like, finest frog hair just walked by me. Like, what am I supposed to do?
Yeah.
And all you tell me to do is pray about it.
Yeah.
Well, finest frog hair is going to say, hey, girl, come on.
Yeah.
I'm going to tell you what to do about it. But you don't give me nothing.
Yes. And the crazy part is that, a lot of times the church will not talk about sex. And there's some people in there, they are sexually repressed. And I'm like, you guys, if y'all don't open this up, y'all going to see a whole lot of people walking around here, bellies getting big, and y'all ain't saying nothing.
That's right about it. That is right about it.
And the crazy thing is that because we haven't, and then the next thing you know, we put shame on people because of the conversations that we refuse to have. And you put, you putting shame on this person because they messed up. You putting shame on that person because now they messed up. And then we have your audacity to say that there's no shame in the house of God.
Right.
The
Bible says there's therefore now no condemnation.
Exactly.
And then we turn around and condemn everybody.
Yeah, exactly. And the crazy part is, you do it from the pulpit, and then the crazy part about it, then you wonder why you ain't got no youth in the church.
Right.
Who wants to hear that?
You know what? They don't want to see the hypocrisy.
Yeah.
Because the truth is, you got pastors who they're not living an integral life.
Yeah, you're right about that.
Whether that's sex, whether that's tithes, whether that's the way he treats his wife, because you can't stand up there and proclaim to be nothing, and then in your own house, your wife don't like you, you don't like her, and then if you a female, you the pastor, your husband, y'all got all kinds of. The Bible say that ministry starts at home. Mm-hmm. So if y'all don't have it right, you can't stand up there and lie to the rest of us. Mm-hmm. So it's just a challenge all the way around.
Yeah, it is. And the crazy part is that there's some people, they live a lie. They live a lie in ministry. They got the church thinking one thing, but it's totally different once they leave those church doors. And
you're right about that.
And that's the sad part. It's like, we gonna pretend here, like everything's good, but then as soon as we get out of here, it's something totally different. And I look at it, some people, they live a lie so that other people can live their convenient truth.
Oh yeah.
Because I did an episode, I was like, Well, what if you found out that your pastor was actually on the down low and he had a wife and kids as a prop? You know, nobody wants to accept that.
You right about that one.
You know, because I'm like, you can't sit up here and tell me ain't some gay pastors out here that are anointed men of God, speaking in tongues, prophesying, and for people to find out that they are gay, it will crush their world. So these pastors, these ministers, they're willing to live a lie so that other people can walk in truth.
That's right.
You know,
right.
And it's a shame. You know, it's a shame. It's a shame because, you know, you can't be who you are.
Right.
You know, you can't be who you are, but you know, I look at it like this. You know, there's going to come an awakening. I thoroughly believe that God is going to awake us when it comes to this whole area of sex, because God gave us all things richly to enjoy, and we have allowed the devil to control the narrative of sex.
Yeah.
You know.
Yeah.
So Doc, let me ask you this. What were like what was your first stage of healing like? I mean, because I know healing is a process. What was that journey like, if you can explain it to us?
Well, just like with any wound, it gets worse before it gets better.
Mm-hmm.
And just the realization that pain is real, just the realization that coming to the grips of failure, coming to the grips of the loss of what I thought would happen in my life,
mm-hmm.
you know, the embarrassment and having to explain that I'm single again, like all of those things were right in my face. Like when I was making the decision on what to do, I had to wrestle with all of that. So my first part of healing was coming to grips with my disappointment
mm-hmm.
in that this is now my stage in life. Coming to grips with, I wrestled with whether or not I even wanted to give love another shot.
Yeah.
Coming to grips with the fact that, man, I've disappointed myself, I've disappointed my kids, I've disappointed God.
Yeah.
At the same time, I had a sense of freedom
mm-hmm.
because now I felt like I had a choice.
Yeah.
Like I don't have to be hurt anymore. I don't have to be broken. I don't have to come home and feel like this is the worst experience ever. I can be free. So that whole piece of being broken, but having peace about doing that at the same time is where I had to begin the journey.
Mm-hmm.
And then I had to be honest with myself and say, okay, here you are. You know, you got options, you got opportunity. Do you want to jump? You have to make a decision on when you want to jump back in. And you know, I made a decision that I would take some time to give myself space to heal,
mm-hmm.
right? But healing is a journey, and so even though I got divorced from my husband a long time ago, there's still areas of healing that are still happening
mm-hmm.
because you remember those times when this happened and when that happened, and those memories come back. You know, that was one of the hardest times in my life that I experienced. Now, I will say that I had a son who died at 39 weeks, and that was very hard for me. And even though that happened 21 years ago, I remember it like it was yesterday.
Mm-hmm.
And so the grieving of that and the grieving of a relationship, all of those things are going to keep. There's always going to be a new first. Like he would have been 21 this year. So of course I'm thinking, man, what would he have been like? You know, I would have been married, 20 something years by now. I wonder what my life would have been like had I been married all that time, you know? And so you have to come to grips with when those memories come and when those moments come, that sadness is going to come. Mm-hmm. And what are you going to do with that sadness? Because the challenge for many of us is we don't want to deal with the sadness of it. And so what do we do with the sadness? We cover it up with sex. We cover it up with alcohol. We cover it up with drugs. We cover it up with fake and phony church stuff. We go to church and we do our little dance and we think we want to feel better. But that sadness is still there when your dance is over.
Mm-hmm. Exactly.
You know, so the challenge is, how do I deal with the sadness of where I am in my life?
Mm-hmm.
And then for some people, that becomes a clinical response, right? Just because you have faith, just because you believe God, doesn't mean you don't need therapy.
Yeah, exactly.
And for some people, you need to pray and take some medication. And that's okay, because there's some things that are physiological. So if your sadness becomes progressive and it becomes overpowering, then you need to talk to somebody.
Yeah.
If your sadness is something that you can manage and you can get out of bed, then okay. But if your sadness takes you to a point where you don't want to get out of bed in the morning and you feel like hurting yourself and you're having suicidal ideation, that's when you need to step over into an expert and say, listen, I can't manage this on my own. And that's okay. And I would appreciate if the church would do a better job in dealing with mental illness. Mental illness is real. I know in the Bible it says there's a lot of demons. Amen. I ain't even going to refute that.
Yeah.
What I'm saying about today, there's some biological things.
Yes.
There's some brain activity. There's some imbalance with some chemicals in our body that needs to be addressed. So I believe the beginning of the healing is coming to the truth about where you really are. And when I came to the truth about where I really was, then that gave me the ability to then be able to focus on the areas that I needed to focus on. Clinical sadness was not my issue. I didn't have suicidal ideation. I didn't have, times when I wanted to crawl up in a ball and stay under the covers and never come out. That was not my issue. My issue was I was disappointed that this is now where I am. So what do I do with the sadness of being disappointed? That means I needed to come up with a plan. I needed to find reasons to affirm myself and say, you know what, at this age, at this time, at this space, you still a bad girl. You all right? You good?
Yeah.
God's got something better for you. So I had to affirm to myself out loud every day that everything's going to be all right.
Yeah.
And so everybody has a context. Everybody has a movement. Everybody has a place and a space. And you got to figure out where your space is and where your grace is. And you got to allow God to touch those most vulnerable places. We try to hide stuff from God. And the Bible says, just thought, I already know everything before you even said it.
Yeah.
But people don't believe that.
Yeah, exactly. Doc, let me ask you this, and it might be a little personal, if you don't mind me asking some off-the-wall questions.
Okay, no problem.
Let me ask you this. How was it the first time that you saw him with that new baby?
Ooh. Well, you talking about my ex-husband with the baby?
Yeah.
Let me tell you how God has some jokes. So here's the thing, right? When the whole thing came out about the baby, we had decided to stay married, and we went to marriage counseling. And then after the text came back that was his daughter, I said, you know what? Since we're going to stay married, we're going to make it work and all this other stuff, then let's incorporate her into the family because she's your daughter, she's our kid sibling, and so we started to get her on the weekend. The crazy thing is that she would not get into car unless I was there. For whatever reason, she was attached to me like I was her biological mother and would not do anything unless I did it. She wasn't going to eat. She wasn't going to go nowhere. She wasn't going to sleep unless I did it.
Wow.
And it was, and the crazy part is, I as much as I love being a mother, that was one of the hardest things for me because I felt like they did it on purpose. And so I wrestled with mothering her, not because I couldn't be a good mother. And people said to me, it's not her fault. She's a baby. And my response was, it's not my fault either. And so why am I being held accountable for something I didn't do?
Yeah.
And so I wrestled with that for a while. And, God just gave me the grace to be able to handle that in that moment. And if I wasn't fasting and if I wasn't praying, I'm not certain that I'd have been able to handle it.
Wow.
I'm going to be honest with you. That is a very difficult emotional place to be when, as much as you love being a mother, you feel like part of you has been, so I felt like one of my babies was given away. I felt like you intentionally gave her my baby. Because those belong to me. And you willingly gave it away, and now I'm forced to be able to have to care for something that you did. And so that was a hard space to be.
Wow.
And I'm telling you, that's one of the hardest, and it had nothing to do with my faith. It had nothing to do with me believing God. It had nothing to do with me being a pastor. It had something to do with me being a woman, being a mother, and being hurt. And unfortunately, I didn't have anybody in my life who would just let me say that.
Wow.
Everybody was like, no, you the pastor, you supposed. All I wanted to do was say, this really sucks.
Yeah. Oh,
Nobody gave me the space to say that.
Oh, my God. I'm serious. I'm sorry that you went through that, because I would have been like, man, please, I've been cussing up a storm and everything.
Yeah.
I've been like, hey, look, y'all going to have to forgive me. I need to vent.
Yeah.
Seriously. So let me ask you this, Doc. Was there ever a time where you were just like angry at him, and it was like, yo, you gonna feel the wrath for a minute?
Oh man. I was so angry. Listen, I wanted him to get struck by lightning on the keyboard in the middle of praise and worship.
Oh my God. Oh my God. Woo.
Yeah. Yeah.
Wow.
And I was so, because the way that it was done was so public, and it was so dishonoring. It was so disgraceful. And I felt like I wanted God to publicly humiliate him. And he still wouldn't have felt how I felt.
Wow. Hey, Doc, let me ask you this. Did you ever just want to be like, you know what? If I see this woman, I'm going to punch her while she's singing. I'm going to punch her right in the throat.
Let me tell you something. I never had that emotion. What I did have was, so when I found out that this was going down, I actually went to her house and I sat down with her and I said to her, I said, now you know that that's my husband.
Yeah.
I've watched your kids for you. I've taken you to the grocery store. We're together almost 7 days a week because we're at this church. I said, why would you do that to me?
Damn.
She said because I'm selfish and I wanted what I wanted. I said, well, do you love him? And she said, no, I don't love him.
Oh my God.
And I said, well, why would you do that? She said, because I like the way he took care of me and the kids. And I said, do you realize that while he was over here playing house with you, he was being so mean to me, cussing me out, all kinds of stuff at home, but over here playing house with you. She was like, well, he told me, he was leaving you for me, and the only reason he was with you is because, y'all had kids, and he wanted to marry me and all sorts of stuff. And I was like, oh, but you don't love him? She was like, no, I don't love him. And so she said something to me that really changed my thinking. She said, now, you're his wife. Everybody's going to be on your side. Who's going to be on my side? Who's going to minister to me? I was like, I don't know.
Oh my
I had no
God.
answer in that moment.
Oh my God. Oh my God. Doc, I'm telling you, you are a woman of integrity. I'm telling you, because it's a whole lot of women, they would have went off. And let me...
Yeah. I never had that. That's just not my nature. I never wanted to punch her in the face, because for me, I held him accountable. He was one who was married, not her.
Yeah, exactly.
Even though she had responsibility, to me, most of the responsibility was his.
Yeah.
And so even in that moment, even in that time, I chose, because a lot of people say, well, did you stay faithful to your husband? Did you cheat because he cheated? That's not my nature. So it didn't even, that was never an option for me to cheat to get back at him. Because to me, I said, I will never give you the satisfaction of stooping to your level.
Yeah, exactly.
Right.
Doc, let me ask you this. Now you're looking at it from hindsight. Do you feel like that woman was sent as a spiritual attack? Because it just seemed like she didn't love your husband. She betrayed you guys. She betrayed you because, you knew her, and you spent time with her. Do you feel like that might have, it was, an attack sent from the devil?
No. I think no. I don't think she was sent from the devil, but I think it's that free will always plays a factor, and we like to default to the devil because then that gives us somebody to blame. But that was a conscious decision of her and him, and nope, that was their choice to do what they wanted to do.
Okay, all right, yeah, I can accept that. Wow. You know what? The one thing I will say is that you are an impeccable woman of character. That's you have character and integrity and ethics, because some women be like, you know what? I'm gonna snatch this heifer's weave out. Serious.
Yeah.
But I get where you're coming from.
I don't have that. You can degrade yourself. I refuse to dishonor myself with that, because then what am I saying about who I believe I am? Yeah. Right? If I degrade myself and dishonor who I am, then I'm feeding into your stuff. So now, what can you really say? Yeah. Now you have to live with the fact that you dishonored yourself. You dishonored me. You dishonored God, and I'm gonna let God handle you.
Yeah, exactly. I'm glad you took the high road. Let me ask you this, because it was public. Was there anybody that came to you and were like, "How come you just don't get angry? How come?" Has anybody ever asked you that type of question because it was so public?
Yes. Well, my close, like my girlfriends and stuff. Just because they gave me, I guess they attempted to give me. Well, let me take that back. So the people who know me know that's not my character. So they knew not to ask that. It was the people who were trying to get information. The people who didn't really care about me. They just wanted some dirt. Yeah. Those are the people who were like, girl, that was, if I was, you was, we was, I was, what was, I'm good. Yeah, so, I mean, I could have, and I had my moments of being angry. It was more important to me to honor God, because I feel like, so when I was, the pastor had asked me to speak to the congregation because he said that the people were hurting. And he asked me to speak to the congregation because I guess he didn't know what to say. So I was shocked that he asked me that. And I was like, Lord, I don't know what to say. In that moment, I understood that God trusts me enough to still honor God in the midst of my pain. So what I said was, anybody in here who is thinking about cheating, whether it's a male or a female, anybody in here who is thinking about dishonoring God, I want you to look at my life. I want you to look at my kids, look at my family, and see how everything is just torn apart. And I want you to think about, is it worth it? Yeah. And I said, sometimes God will allow things to happen in your life because God trusts that you will still allow God to get the glory in the midst of your pain. And I said, so that's why I'm standing here before you, because God trusts that I'm not going to make this about me, but I'm going to say to you that if this is what you're thinking about doing, if this is what you're involved in, then you need to stop it right now. Yeah. And that's all I said. Wow,
that's good. So let me ask you this: Did the church and your friends did they begin to cover you in prayer? Because I mean, you were hurting, you were very vulnerable at that time.
They did. The one thing that really helped me in that moment, I remember, because the truth is, I even after all of that, I didn't leave my husband yet. Like, in that moment I left, but then I came back. So it was on like 4 or 5 times of leaving and coming back. And so one day I was on the phone with my father. I was like 35, and my father said to me, he said, when you were young, I allowed you to believe that you were a chicken. And there's nothing wrong with being a chicken if you're a chicken. He was like, but I always knew you were an eagle. And me allowing you to think that you were a chicken and not letting you see that you've always been an eagle, I impeded your growth. He said, but now I'm telling you that you have always been an eagle, and it's time to fly. And if you don't fly, now it's because you decided to hang with the chickens instead of the eagles. And that didn't change my life, because while I understand that chickens are necessary, when you're an eagle trying to be a chicken, then you can't live full. If you're a chicken trying to be an eagle, you can't live full. And there are some varying, analogies in between. Everybody's not a chicken, everybody's not an eagle, but just to use this as an analogy, for him to release me from being something I learned how to be. Like, I've always known I've been different. There's just things that, that I've been able to do, and I would dumb it down and I would minimize who I was to accommodate the lifestyle that I had created. But as I began to realize that I didn't have to stay in the foolishness that I created, that I can then spread my wings and be who I'm always supposed to be, that released me of the responsibility of facilitating this life. And so that really changed my life, regardless, the people that were praying for me, all that kind of stuff. But even with people praying for you, you still have to make the decision to walk away. You still have to make a decision to walk in your healing. So people can pray for you all they want to. But at the beginning of the day and at the end of the day, it's still your choice to either walk in that healing or stay stuck.
Okay, I like that. Doc, let me ask you this: what was the Lord telling you during that period of your life?
Oh man, I would say it was varying things, because my traumatic childhood was overriding my desire to be free from that relationship. So in that moment, my thought was, my children are still young. I have to be able to provide for them. Can I do this on my own? Do I need to stay? So for me, I made a choice to take one for the team, if that makes sense. And I was like, I'll stay in this dysfunctional relationship long enough until I can take care of these kids by myself. And so I just believe that the Lord was just healing the brokenness in my heart and saying, listen, I got you. I understand why you think you need to do it this way. I'm going to put some provisions around you. And I always believe that God operates in my life by open and closed doors. So when the doors are open, that's the way to go. When the doors begin to close, that's the way not to go. And so as God was opening doors and closing doors, that helped me to navigate the path.
Wow, that's good. That's good, because that's definitely word. That's, God will open a door that no man can close, and then there will be doors that God closes that no man can open. So that's definitely word. So let me ask you this, Doc. Was there ever a time where your ex-husband, he asked you for forgiveness? Was there ever a time of closure?
Yeah, we've had, So we got to a point. So even now, I just talked to him the other day, and we just have that relationship where, it's all cool in the game, because I understood that there was a time, there was a place, there were things he had to grow into maturity. I had to grow into maturity, and I'm not one to hold grudges. So, we have our relationship is good. Our son just graduated from high school a few weeks ago, and he came up for the graduation. So, we have a functioning relationship now that's not contingent upon the past. And so we made a decision to put the past in the past and just, move on with life and raise our kids and just be as healthy as possible. So, there's certain things we don't talk about because it just doesn't make sense to. It happened. We were both there. We know what happened. Reliving the past and throwing it in each other's face, that's dysfunctional. That doesn't make any sense. So we don't. And then we have a responsibility to our kids. To be as healthy as possible, because we still co-parent. Even though, our youngest will be 19 next week, we still have to co-parent. So what do they learn if they can't see us function as healthy, God-fearing people? If we say we love the Lord, then let's act like it.
Yeah, exactly. I think that's where a lot of people get hemmed up at when it comes to, the relationship breaks up, and then, how do we be civil with the kids? And a lot of times it starts off, good, but then somebody mentions something and it just goes to hell. And the next thing you know, you're talking about stuff that happened 20 plus years ago.
Yeah, right.
So, Doc, I just want to say thank you for your transparency and everything like that. I just thank you. I honor you. I thank you for saying yes to God. I thank you for, even in the midst of what you went through, for just being that example, being a woman of integrity, being a woman of moral character. Thank you for just, for just being. And I just want to say I honor you and I thank you for your time today.
Well, it's been my pleasure. Anytime.
Yeah, no problem. So can you give us some words of wisdom for those who may be looking, at divorce? Can you give us some words of wisdom and encouragement?
I would say the first thing, wherever you are in the divorce process, whether it's contemplation, whether it's in the middle of it, whether it's having doubts about having done it, all of those places are real and relevant to you. And don't allow anybody to minimize your emotional pain around it. Whether you initiated the divorce, whether you are the recipient of the initiation of the divorce, wherever you find yourself, there's loss involved. And you need to honor how you feel about it. And I would say that wherever you find yourself, you need to begin and fast and pray that God would give you the strength to endure. Because there's emotional pain that comes with divorce. There's spiritual pain that comes with divorce. And there's not a lot of support systems in place to help you walk through that. There's a lot of condemnation. There's a lot of shame that comes from the people who are supposed to love you. And then you have people who are bandwagon jumpers who just want to see somebody else in pain and ride the wave of saying, look at you, look at you, look at you. And so you begin to see who your real friends are. You begin to see who really loves you. And those people, so when you realize who your real friends are and you realize who really loves you, then you make that demarcation. You say, you know what? You're not real anyway. So divorce has a way of showing you who people really are. And in that moment, you need to honor that. So fast and pray. Ask God to give you the strength. Ask God to give you the ability to stand up against the shame, stand up against what people say should have happened. People always have opinions about what they would do in your position. Well, they're not in your position. They're not in your shoes. They have no credibility because they're not you. They don't have the lived truth of what you've been through. And what you've been through is what you have been through. And nobody can take that from you. What you think might be wrong, how you feel is never wrong. How you feel is how you feel. Take ownership of that, manage that, give that to God, and allow God to bring healing in your life. And stop listening to people who don't even know what they're talking about. Nobody can tell you about your life but you. The only thing you need to listen to is what's in the Word and what God gives you from response to what's in the Word. Find somebody that's a confidant, somebody that you can vent to, because sometimes you just need to talk about it. You don't need people to fix it. You just need them to talk. You need them to be a listening ear. Everybody that's with you is not for you. You can't talk to everybody about your relationship. You can't talk to everybody about your brokenness. If you're a pastor, if you're a spiritual leader, you have to be very careful who you share that with, because you can then impede somebody's faith. You can't talk to your congregation. You can't vent to your congregation because you're broken. You can't use the pulpit as a way to get back at your spouse. You can't use the pulpit as your therapy. You cannot do that. You need to find somebody who has been where you've been, somebody you can have confidence in. Every pastor is not prepared to tell you the story. So you have to be very careful, very intentional, and allow God to give you discernment of who you need to talk to, how you need to proceed. Because you can dishonor God and glorify the devil in one sentence and one moment. And so you don't want to do that. You got to figure out where your boundaries are, figure out what you need to do for you. If you are the one who initiated the divorce, then you have to take responsibility for your part and begin to fast and pray and forgive yourself, forgive that person, and then make a created space that is a space of safety and healing for yourself. Self-care is very important. Nobody's going to love you like you can. So other than God loving you and you loving you, and for heaven's sake, don't jump into another relationship until you don't open one door without closing the other. Don't do it.
Wow, Doc, that is amazing. So, Doc, can you tell us, how can we get your books? Can you tell us about your website and how people may follow you on social media?
Absolutely. On Facebook, I'm Ashellarine Lang. On Instagram, I'm Dr. Ashellarine. On Twitter, I am at Rev Shella. My website is desakajosflow.com. It's DESAKAJOSFLO.com. All of my books on Amazon. If you type in my name, they will all come up. And that's where I am. I'm all over. If you need me, by all means, send me an email. All of that's on my website with my email. If you need to find me, do it on Facebook or do it on my website or Instagram or Twitter, and I'll get back to you.
All right. Hey, Doc, can you tell us about your audio books?
Oh, yeah. When you go on Amazon, it'll ask you if you want the audio version, the Kindle version, or the paperback. And so you'll be able to see it on audible.com. Some of it is on iTunes. But when you go on Amazon, it'll tell you which versions it is. And some of them have 3, some of them just have 2, and you'll be able to see it there. So some people don't like to read, so if you want to listen, I'll take care of that too.
Okay. Hey, Doc, let me ask you this. Your book, Does Love Cover That? Is that in audio form as well?
That is in audio form. Does Love Cover That is in audio, it's in Kindle, and it's in paperback. And actually, the current edition, so when I originally wrote that book, I had 2 separate books. I had a book and a workbook. And the newest edition, I combined the workbook and the book into one book.
Okay, that's great. That's great. So, guys, I'm going to tell you, Dr. Lang dropped some gems tonight. Get her books. Get a hold of her if you need some coaching. She will coach you as well. So, Doc, I just want to say thank you. I honor you. I just want to say thank you and I appreciate you. Thank you for listening to God, because I know you have, you've been through a journey and everything like that. But the one thing I see is that you have been a deliverer and you have brought healing to people's lives. And I just want to say thank you.
Amen. It's my pleasure.
All right. You have a blessed one.
You too.
All right. Bye.
All right.
All right, guys. That was Dr. Lang. So, hey, pick up her material, because I'm going to tell you, man, if you need help, she is the person that you need to talk to. So, we don't have to suffer in silence. And with that being said, guys, I love you. I want to say I appreciate you. Listen to those episodes that I called out earlier. The episode on, Tears on Bricks, the episode with Belize Spivey, and this episode as well. So, guys, God wants healing to come to his people. And so we're striving to make sure that we give you content, that we give you messages that's going to promote that. And so that is why I'm striving for the whole month of August to deal with this whole thing about church hurt and emotional healing, and bringing you different people who can show you how to overcome and to help you feel better about yourself and decisions that need to be made right now. So with that being said, guys, you have a blessed one. Peace.
Walk in the truth that makes you free every day. Follow Brother Leon on all social media outlets.